Designed specifically for lightweight e-bikes, the Bosch SX motor is the latest option to come from the German electronics brand. With the likes of Specialized, TQ and Fazua having dominated the category over the past 4 years, there was a lot of anticipation about how Bosch would respond. Now, I've been riding several test bikes fitted with the Bosch SX motor, including the Norco Fluid VLT, the Canyon Neuron On Fly, and a prototype that I can't talk about just yet. Here we'll be diving into what we like about the Bosch SX motor, what we don't like, and how it compares to the competition. Purpose-built for the lightweight e-bike category, the Bosch SX motor is 20% smaller and 800 grams lighter than the full-powered CX motor. It's claimed to weigh just 2 kilos, which is pretty similar to the TQ and Specialized SL, and it's considerably lighter than the Fazua Ride 60. It's also much slimmer than the CX motor. Bosch has shrunk the Q factor down from 178 to 160 millimeters, which makes for a more natural pedaling stance that's closer to a regular mountain bike. Now, it does produce less peak torque at 55 Newton meters. However, it is claimed to achieve the same 600 watts of peak power. You will need to be pedaling with meaning, as it requires a cadence of over 100 RPM before it reaches maximum power. Still, its output is considerably higher than the TQ, Specialized and Fazua motors, which, as we'll discuss in detail shortly, is very noticeable out on the trail. Alongside the SX motor, Bosch has developed a new 400 watt-hour power tube battery. It's claimed to weigh just 2 kilos, and it features newer cells with a higher energy density. It's also narrower in profile, and that allows frame manufacturers to engineer a slimmer and lighter down tube. Combined with the SX motor, you're looking at a system weight of just 4 kilos. To put that into perspective, that's lighter than Bosch's 750 watt-hour battery on its own. For those who want to take on longer rides though, it is possible to purchase the Power More range extender. This boosts total capacity to 650 watt-hours, which is basically the same as a full-powered e-bike, and it is significantly more than the TQ and Specialized equivalents. As for the user interface, our test bikes feature the system controller integrated into the frame's top tube. There are 5 LEDs to display the battery status in 10% increments, with each LED turning white before disappearing altogether. You'll find the wireless mini remote next to the left-hand grip for changing the assist modes. You don't necessarily need the remote, however, as you can use the mode button on the system controller instead. As with the bigger CX motor, you'll find the same Eco, Tour, e-MTB and Turbo modes. Using the Flow app, you can customize the modes and remove any that you're not using. For example, with our test bikes, we removed the Tour mode and replaced it with Tour Plus. You can also use the app to tune the power output of the SX motor. We've got a lot more information about this in our Bosch Tuning Tips video if you're keen to check it out. Now, across the 3 test bikes that I've ridden, the Bosch SX motor has impressed with its powerful and responsive performance, which sets a whole new bar in the lightweight e-bike category. It packs a serious punch, offering significantly more power and faster pickup at the pedals compared to the TQ, Specialized and Fazua motors. Indeed, in the turbo mode, it feels very close to the bigger CX motor. The assistance comes on fast and strong, providing fantastic acceleration, and that sensation is accentuated on a lightweight e-bike, which typically comes fitted with faster rolling tyres. Now, I've mostly been using the adaptive Tour Plus and e-MTB modes, which scale the motor's assistance based on how hard you're pushing the pedals. This provides more natural and intuitive power delivery, which sees the motor better matching what your legs are doing. Compared to the full-powered CX motor though, it's worth noting that the SX drive unit is more sensitive to cadence as well as your input torque. If you're just ticking over the pedals, the power output is pretty mellow, and that helps to conserve the battery. Pedal a bit faster though, and you'll hear and feel the SX motor take off. As mentioned earlier, you'll need to be pedaling with a cadence of over 100 RPM before you reach maximum power. That sounds fast, and indeed not many riders are going to sustain that kind of cadence on a really long fire road climb. But heading up technical single track, you'd be surprised at how many times you're pedaling at over 100 RPM. The increase in assistance is particularly welcome when approaching steeper sections and awkward features, and so too is the extended boost function. This sees the motor continuing to supply power for an additional meter after you've stopped pedaling, which can often mean the difference between making it up over a rocky ledge or stalling out. Now, the way that the Bosch SX motor ramps up its power is really impressive, but it does take a few rides to get used to. Over time, you'll find yourself more regularly downshifting to spin at a higher cadence, which is really what the motor wants. I think this is a great attribute for newer riders, as it encourages you to make use of the available gears. Speaking to a variety of bike shops, it seems it's fairly common for a beginner rider to wear out just a single cog on the cassette of their e-bike. This is because most full-powered motors will provide plenty of pull even in the higher gears. And while the Bosch SX motor does provide plenty of power, it really benefits from you spinning the pedals faster in order to unlock its full potential. Not only is that better for the motor, it also improves the lifespan of your drivetrain too. Once you get a feel for how it behaves, the power is easy to modulate on loose and technical climbs. I found the SX motor to be smoother and more natural compared to the bigger CX motor, and it's more controllable too. Setting off from a standstill partway up a climb, there is minimal lag before the assistance kicks in, but it never feels like the bike is going to loop out from underneath you. Bosch has clearly done a lot of work on the firmware for this drive unit, and the result is a really intuitive connection between your legs and the output to the rear tyre. As for downsides, while the Bosch SX motor is smaller than its full-powered sibling, its profile is still on the larger side. That's especially the case when comparing it to the tiny TQ motor, which can be more discreetly integrated into the frame's design. In terms of performance, for me the biggest downside of the Bosch SX motor is the annoying clacking noise on the descents. This is due to the internal freewheel, which disconnects the motor from the drivetrain when it isn't supplying power. That helps to reduce drag, which Bosch claims is 50% less compared to the CX motor. However, it also results in a clacking noise when you're coasting along rough terrain. The CX motor has been getting quieter in this regard over the past couple of years, and that made the noise all the more apparent on the SX motor across the test bikes we've been riding. While it is true that you tune it out over time, we prefer it didn't make that noise to begin with. Otherwise, the SX motor is pretty decent when it comes to general noise on the climbs. It isn't as whisper quiet as the TQ, but it's comparable to the Fazua, and it's definitely less audible compared to the specialized SL. Now, although the Bosch SX motor delivers powerful and rapid assistance, it's worth acknowledging that it won't give you a totally free ride. As mentioned before, it requires a decent cadence to continue supplying power as the gradient kicks up. As such, you'll benefit from reading the terrain and downshifting in anticipation of steep pinch climbs. Having the SRAM transmission on our test bikes has been a boon in this regard, as it allows you to shift a lot later and pedal through each shift to better maintain your momentum. This is really the biggest point of difference compared to the full-powered CX motor, which provides a heap of grunt in almost any gear. In comparison, the lower torque output of the SX motor means it is possible to stall out if you get caught in too high of a gear. I'd also suggest that riders who are after an e-bike for self-shuttling purposes will likely be disappointed by the SX motor. You really need to put in the effort to get the most out of it, which means it's not as well suited to lazy pedaling. Then again, most of those folks will naturally gravitate towards a bigger and heavier full-powered e-bike in the first place. In contrast, the Bosch SX motor is a great match for sporty and active riders who prefer the more natural assistance of a lightweight e-bike. Now, some of you may be wondering how much range you can get out of that 400 watt-hour battery. Using the adaptive e-MTB mode, most of my rides were between 33 and 42 kilometers long with around 1,000 to 1,100 meters of elevation gain. To put it into simpler terms, that was around 2 hours of riding before the battery ran flat. On these longer rides, you'll notice that the last two LEDs on the system controller will turn orange once the battery reaches 30%, and that's to provide you with a visual warning. At 10% remaining, the final LED will turn red, and you'll feel the motor's torque output drop down to help eke out the final portion of the battery. However, unlike some other motors that dribble along at this point, the SX motor still provides decent support all the way down to 0% before it switches off altogether. Now, to provide some more comparative data, I subjected both the Norco and the Canyon to our standardized range test. This involves going up the same road climb with a 10% average gradient, with the motor set to its most powerful setting before bombing down a single track descent. The idea is to rack up as many laps as possible before the battery runs flat. Now, both the Norco and the Canyon ended up with around 1,300 meters of elevation gain, which is an impressive amount of climbing. If you're keen to see the results and how they stack up against all the other lightweight e-bikes and motors that we've reviewed, click the link in the video description below to check out the full review. As for our verdict on the Bosch SX motor, well, despite not being the smallest on the market, the reduction in weight and width over the bigger CX motor is still very much welcome. And the fact that it produces up to 600 watts of peak power gives it a significant advantage over the motors you'll typically find on a lightweight e-bike. It is considerably more powerful, it's more responsive, and the extended boost function is brilliant on technical climbs. You do need to put in a decent amount of effort to unlock that full power, and the high cadence required means it's not a motor we'd recommend for self-shuttlers and lazy pedalers. Its dynamic performance means it really suits a more active rider, and as such, it's a great match for lightweight e-bikes like the Norco Fluid VLT and the Canyon Neuron On Fly. Combined with Bosch's reputation for reliability and its extensive global service network, and there is a lot going for the SX system. Now, if you've got any questions for us about the Bosch SX motor and how it compares to others on the market, make sure you drop those into the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video review and we'll see you next time. Tooroo!